I'd like to welcome you to the March 24th, 2021 meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Irvin?
Present.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Present.
Commissioner Lewin is excused. Commissioner Song?
Present.
Vice Chair Maruzzi?
Here.
And Chair Wormuck.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Madam Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Can I have a motion for the acceptance of the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Maruzzi seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. We're at public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar and other agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes will be allowed for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings may be offered at this time or at the time of the hearing. Members of the public who would like to comment on item 1A, 1B, and 3A are directed to comment under this portion of the agenda. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
No one has called in and requested to speak, Madam Chair, but if there are members of the public who are on the Zoom meeting this evening that would like to speak at this time, you may do so by turning on your microphone.
This would include the Riverside University Health System Evolved Engineering and the Woodridge Group. There being nobody who wishes to speak, the public hearing is closed. Item 1A is the consent calendar. We have 2 items on the consent calendar: the minutes of September 23, 2020, October 14th, 2020, and October 28th, 2020, and the Riverside University Health System for proposed sign program for a multi-tenant center located at 191 North Sunrise Way. Can I have a motion, please? Commissioner Hirschbein has made the motion. Do we have a second?
Well, actually, I have a question. There's 1 or 2 parcels on the corner that I understand are going to be fast food uses or something similar to that. Does this signage, the signage program doesn't address that as far as I can see. Will that come back as a separate sign program?
It would come back as an amendment to the sign program, so you would see that at a later date.
Okay, but moving forward, if council adopts the changes we recommended last time, would we not see it then?
You're correct. The AC would review the sign program then.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it, but I'm going to abstain from the October 14th minutes since I was not in attendance.
Oh, I'm getting what? Yeah.
You were at all 3.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please? Terry, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes.
Vice Chair Maruzzi?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner Song?
Yes.
And Chair Wormuck.
Yes, thank you. The next item that is before us is, it's a public hearing. It is Evolved Engineering on behalf of Morg LLC Morgay, I'm not sure in the pronunciation, LLC, for a conditional use permit to operate a cannabis facility, including type 6 non-volatile manufacturing, cultivation, dispensary, distribution, and a lounge in a vacant industrial building within an existing business park located at 1241 Gene Autry Trail. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Warnick and members of the Planning Commission. So the item before you today is a conditional use permit to operate a type 6 manufacturing and cultivation facility. The project itself will include a lounge, a dispensary, and distribution. However, those three uses do not require a conditional use permit. The location is an existing 7,243 square foot building that was constructed in 1989. And at that time, as it is today, all the development standards were met. Although the entire square footage of the building is 7,243, only 633 square foot of the building will be dedicated to manufacturing and cultivation. I just want to provide you a little background before I share some slides with you. The administrative or regulatory permit was issued to the applicant on June 4, 2019. The number is 6C-2019-065. The CUP application itself was submitted to the Planning Division on August 29, 2019. Unfortunately, a new zoning ordinance became effective at that location in January of 2020. However, under the provisions of 5.55.070, subsection F of the Municipal Code, this application is eligible for city manager waiver of the zoning standard as a prior application. As I've indicated in the staff report, there are two main issues relative to this project. The first one, of course, is the change of the zoning requirement. And then the second one is the parking deficient. So the parking required for a use of this type for that size of building will be 15 spaces. The applicant has provided 12 spaces. They are deficient of 3 spaces. I will speak more to this later on with the conditions and other requirements that are placed on this application should the Planning Commission decide to approve the project. So I will ask to indulge me for a second to share my slides with you. All right. This one, right? Double click. Is it on now?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the slide that you are seeing now, it's an area view of the site and the vicinity. Here is the site, the industrial complex that houses 9 different buildings, and it is surrounded by other uses such as the DWA building, a storage facility to the east of it, and the animal shelter to the northwest side of the area. So this is just the overall area view of the location. This next slide will is to share with you the current uses of the buildings that are at the industrial complex. So although there are 5 current cannabis facilities at the location, however, only 3 of them are actually in operation at this point. So the ones that are in operation will be the ones at the 1235, so TPE is a type N for only manufacturing, transportation, and distribution. And then there is Premier Gardens, 1231. That's only for distribution, transportation, and cultivation. And then there is the one at 1227 South Genotry, which is only transportation and distribution. And then at 1239, it's called the flagship distribution. It is only for transportation and distribution only. The MOG is the application that is before you tonight. And the last is the one, it's a new application, which is not operational at this time. At 1247, it is called a Sunray. So all these are the cannabis facilities at the location. I did include a map that will show not only the cannabis facilities at this site, but also in the immediate vicinity, ranging all the way from Ramon Road to Williams and Camino Paracela area. So these are all the other existing cannabis facilities. Most of them are lounges and distribution facilities only. A couple of them are involved with manufacturing. But also in this map, I want to show you the relative to this site to where the Mute Park, that's where this arrow is. This is the site here, and this is the beginning of the Mute Park. And it is approximately 1,054 feet away from the location. The nearest residential use is approximately 1,241 feet away from the location. So this is the map that was provided to staff regarding their shared parking area. The applicant has an agreement with the operators of Premier Greens that would allow them access into their parking area so that that will make up for the parking deficient. I will speak more again to that when I get to the project-specific conditions of approval that staff is recommending to the Planning Commission. So this slide will show you relative to the site where the civil link is. So this is segment 2A of the civil link. This is the project site right here. And here is a continuation of the civil link. So from here, it's approximately to segment 2A is approximately 1,192 feet away from the site. And to the one to the east of it is approximately 1,239 feet away from the location. This is just the current picture of the building itself. So this is the exterior of it. This is the site plan of the building. Again, this is the building itself, surrounded by the parkings that are dedicated to this building. And this is the floor plan of the building itself. This floor plan shows the different uses of the spaces. The cultivation and manufacturing, as I mentioned earlier, will be only 633 square foot. The lounge area happens to
take that back a little. As it's coming onto our screen, we're not able to see the whole slide.
Oh, okay.
It's been true of all the slides.
Let me see. How about now?
No change.
No change? Okay. Let me see. What's going on?
It's not showing correctly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Swap screens.
That was what I did earlier. Okay. How about now, Madam Chair?
Now it's better. It's small, but you can at least see it.
Okay.
Not sure for other people. It's a very small picture of the interior of the two floors.
We're seeing presenter view, which we really shouldn't be seeing.
Showing that. Maybe you can switch it again. Maybe
Okay, let me try one more thing. Duplicate side. Okay, maybe this will help.
No, the other one.
This one. This is duplicate.
duplicate, we'll just put that one over here.
How about now, Madam Chair? Is there any improvement?
No.
Let's try that.
Okay. Better?
It is better, yes.
Okay, all right. Do you want me to start from the beginning or should I proceed?
Just proceed.
Okay.
Well, to the rest of the commission, do you agree?
Proceed.
Okay. All right. So this current slide is the site plan again. It shows the layout of the building itself and the surrounding parking areas. And this slide here shows even though it says first floor and second floor, it is a single story building with a mezzanine on it. So here you notice that the cultivation and manufacturing area occupies 633 square foot. The lounge is what really occupies most of the spaces. And because of the way that parking calculations were made, there is also a condition that is being proposed that will restrict the number of seating areas to what is shown here. And it is indicated that in the future, should the applicant decide to increase the number of seating capacity, the CUP will have to come back to the Planning Commission for an amendment. So this current slide is for the odor control area. I mentioned that this area here is where the manufacturing will take place. Naturally, the manufacturing and cultivation area tend to emit more odors. So I know the applicant will speak more to this, but the odor control plan itself consists of three main components. That is the carbon filter, the box in the box itself, and then the vestibule areas, all designed to prevent exfiltration of odors from the facility. Here is a cross section of how it will look like. And here is another cross section showing the south side of the interior. So there are 5 project-specific conditions that staff is proposing to the Planning Commission should you decide to approve the project. The first one has to do with the trash enclosure. Currently, they are using a dedicated trash enclosure to this building. So I met with the applicant and spoke with them about this. They are in agreement to install a trash enclosure that was removed for whatever reason some time ago. The second proposed condition has to do with the parking itself. And it reads as follows, that pursuant to PSGC section 93.06.00B7, the applicant shall be required to submit a land use permit to the planning division for a parking plan that would allow a shared parking agreement between the MOG and Premier Gardens LLC. The parking plan shall remain in effect for as long as the MOG LLC remains operational at the location. Number 3 speaks to the lounge seating capacity. There shall be a capacity of 13 seats in the lounge area as indicated on the floor plan, date stamped March 16, 2021. Any changes to the seat count in the lounge area shall require an amendment to the CUP. Number 4 has to do with inspections. Inspection of mechanical equipment shall be required at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and then after the biannual basis by an independent third party chosen by the city at the applicant's expense. The 6th one has to do with the waiver of the development standards, the zoning standards in particular. Pursuant to Palm Springs Municipal Code, section 5.55.070, subsection F, the city manager waives the zoning restriction relative to the cultivation and type 6 manufacturing uses in the M1 zone district in accordance with the administrative permit number 2019-065 that was issued to the applicant on June 4, 2019. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a categorical exemption under the CEQA guidelines, having conducted an assessment, an environmental assessment on the site. We did not discover any type of hazardous material in the building or around the building. Staff is therefore comfortable in recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a categorical exemption and that this Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit subject to the attached and added conditions of approval. Before I conclude my presentation, I just want to take a quick second to read into record some of the questions that were asked earlier relative to this project. The first one had to do with odor complaints or police reports for other cannabis facilities in the business park. I spoke with the Director of Special Program Compliance yesterday, and it was indicated to me that the only facility that had complaints at the location in the past had been, the license had been revoked and they are no longer at the site. I also spoke with the supervisor of the code enforcement. So I was informed that there had been no other complaints coming from that location. And as for the parking, the staff is proposing that in addition to whatever condition the commission may impose as regards relative to the parking issues tonight, the applicant will also submit an LUP. And at that time, a time frame will be added to the lifespan of the LUP. And also, parking will be part of the reports that will be presented to the Planning Commission in the first 6 months once the facility begins operation. So if they are not in compliance with parking requirements, staff will have to meet and then make a decision at that point. The applicant is aware of that. Madam Chair, I will conclude my staff report. I'm available for any questions. The applicant is also on the Zoom to make a presentation to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Questions? I'm just going to go through the commission, starting with Vice Chair Maruzzi. Do you have, and I'll ask if you have questions of staff.
I have one question. Regarding the CUP and the number of seats in the lounge, I guess it's 13. And I understand that if in the future they wanted to add seats, it would have to come back to us for a change to the CUP. Is that right?
Correct. That's the condition.
So is that typical? I mean, for example, if this was a bar and they wanted to add more seats to the bar, would that require a change in the CUP?
If parking requirements were not an issue, that would not be the issue. The fear is that additional seating capacity might exacerbate parking requirements. So,
oh, I see. So it's all related to parking.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Hirschbein, do you have questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Let's see if I can get through these quickly. Under the fire code, how many seats are allowed with that size building?
So again, if parking weren't an issue, with the size of that land, they could have up to 25, although the fire department would have to make that call.
Okay, up to 25 seats. Oh, 25 seats, okay. In terms of that mezzanine area, I noticed there's no elevator access. Are they exempt from providing ADA access to the mezzanine?
I have to do some research into that. That would be a question that would have been best directed to the building official. I'll have to do some digging into that.
Mr. Hirschlein, I'll
Yeah.
just go ahead and jump in. Yes, it is currently exempt from ADA requirements. If there was a significant expansion of the building at some future date, they may have to provide ADA facilities to the mezzanine, but at this point, no.
So a remodel doesn't trigger that requirement?
Not unless there's a significant expansion.
I'm sorry, what?
Unless there's a significant expansion.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. One question. Okay, so my next question is, why did it take 1.5 years for this to get to us after they applied for the CUP?
Okay. So normally an application, a CUP of this type would take approximately 6 to 8 months to prepare, depending on the workload. And in fairness, the first time this was on the agenda to come before you was November of 2020. But then at the time, we came to the realization that the mailing labels for the public hearing expired because it's been here for longer than 6 months. So, and then secondly, it was also on the agenda to come before you in January, but there were questions regarding the odor control plan. The original odor control plan was reviewed by the previous odor expert for the city. Now we have a different odor control consultant. So in order for them to give you an informed determination as to the effectiveness of this odor control plan, we had to push forward the hearing so that they will have adequate time to review the plan. And honestly, the fact that we couldn't bring it to you from the month of March to the ending of 2020 also had to do with the current situation.
So this didn't have to do with the applicant, that it had to do with certain processes that the city has?
That's correct. Plus, we were asking for adequate materials that are presentable to you.
Okay. Just for my own information, what is a categorical exemption? I've heard that term before. I just don't know what that means. You're asking that we exempt this project from CEQA review, but is that the same as categorical exemption?
Yeah, that's correct. So when under CEQA, when an initial study is conducted, there could be 3 outcomes. Number one, there could be a negative declaration, meaning that you've reviewed all the potential issues relative to the project itself. And if there is none that are subject to mitigations, you will declare a negative declaration. The second one would be mitigated negative declaration, meaning that there might be some likely issues. However, if some mitigation measures are taken, those issues will be, those potential issues could be mitigated. The third one would be categorical exemption. That means there are no issues that are under CEQA guidelines that meet the threshold of either declaring a negative declaration or declaring a mitigated negative declaration. So it meets all those findings, therefore.
Okay, I get it. Thank you. That clarifies it. Sometimes we hear terms and we don't know exactly what they mean. In terms of the city manager being able to waive zoning requirements under this statute, it says he may waive them. Has he, and is it necessary for him to do that?
So the complete language really says that the city manager or his designee, in this case, the director of development services is the designee. So I will let the director speak to that if he may.
If I can jump in. When the new regulations were adopted, this provision was added so that those applicants who had received their administrative permit but hadn't yet received their conditional use permit for a cannabis-related use had the opportunity to move through the process. Relative to the waiver, it's not something that we would grant unless the Planning Commission approves the conditional use permit.
I see.
If you all approve the conditional use permit, the waiver would then be issued.
So that's an automatic, once, assuming PC approves it, then the waiver's sort of an automatic thing?
Correct, but we would not approve the waiver unless the conditional use
Right.
are also
Okay.
approved.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for clarifying all those things.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Song, you had questions.
Yes. So in this location between September 2019 and January 2020, are there more applications coming for this site?
Well, in our department, in our division, we do not have any additional application at this point.
Okay. And then between when those applications, the applications that were submitted before January 2020, have we approved under this conditional use permit where the city manager can waive, have we approved any manufacturing or cultivation businesses?
Yeah, so a TP, so one of the facilities that I showed earlier on was approved, I believe, around March of 2020. So that would be the only one that comes to mind.
And Edward, do you know if they have submitted for plan check corrections and permit and are in business?
I know that they submitted plan checks for interior renovations only. So I'm not sure. So when I was there this week, I didn't see any life of operations at the site.
Okay. The business of Name Edible, where they're going to do the shared parking program, that does not have any public lounge in the program.
No,
Right.
Premier Gardens does not include a lounge. It's only manufacturer.
Okay. And then two more questions. Is there any issue about percentage of buildings in M1 where they're supposed to be for retail versus for industrial or manufacturing purposes?
There is no such provision in the code.
Okay. All right. And then the applicant, it sort of adding to the applicant at the beginning when submitting the application back in August of 2019, was the application thorough and complete? And as we have learned through other projects, it was suggested that if you consider these other alternatives for odor control and so on, you would be able to present a better project.
Yeah, so going through the checklist at the time of submittal, yeah, they met all those requirements. However, upon in-depth review compared to the standard that we now review our odor control plan. At that time, yeah, but currently no. So I have the older design and plans at that time. It would not have met the standard of your requirements of today.
Okay. And last question about parking. So their manufacturing and growing area is about 600 square feet. And one space is required every 1,000 square feet. So,
Correct, but yeah, and we have to round those up, unfortunately. So that helped to increase the number of parking requirement. Yeah, you're correct. You're right, yes.
Okay, you read my mind. Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Commissioner Irvin, do you have questions?
Just one simple question. To kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Maria said, with the proposals, and is there any other, like she said, from 2019 to 2020 that's still carrying over that hasn't been approved that are on the agenda from, I know she said within the building, but how about within a mile radius?
Within the mile radius in that area, well, I'll tell you one thing. What we've been doing lately, when inquiries are fielded on locations, we tend to want to, we point to where the cannabis overlay is. So within 1 mile radius of that area, I do not believe there is a pending application for type 6 or type 7 type of cannabis facility.
Mr. Robertson, if I could just jump in, I believe we have 3 applications that received their administrative permits in 2019, but
okay,
not have their conditional use permits yet. I know that one of those will most likely withdraw the application. There's one application that Mr. Newell is working on, but it is to the northwest of the airport in an industrial area there. And the third application, I believe, is on Williams Road, but I may be incorrect on that. But there are 3 applications that I'm aware of that are still going through the process of finalizing additional use permit materials.
And what are the square footage of those facilities?
I apologize, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I don't believe any of them are significant in terms of the square footage of either the manufacturing or cultivation functions, just based on their location and the buildings that they're going into.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Director Fagak just mentioned the one at 888 Research Drive, which is near the DMV. That one is going to occupy the entire building. So that one is, well, it's an existing building. They are proposing to put a cannabis facility in the entire building there. That's it's a decent sized building. So just trying to pull up the exhibits here so I can give you the exact square footage. So that one is an existing 19,000 square foot building. It's not entirely going to be occupied by cultivation. It will have cultivation, a lounge, a dispensary, so a mixture of different cannabis facility uses, but it is an existing 19,000 square foot building.
And you said that's in the DMV area?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have some questions, and they go to 2 different areas. The first one is the concentration, and the other is parking. You said that the parking plan has to remain in place as long as Morgue LLC is operational. But if we give a CUP, that would allow a successor to come in if Morgue was not operational to run the same kind of business. Is that correct?
That is correct, but then the parking agreement is between the Morgue and Premier Gardens. So if required parking is not met at that time, that would require a different review process. So assuming the Morgue were to vacate the building and a different operator were to come there, and if it consists of the same type of uses, the lounge, distribution, and dispensary. So if they do not meet the required parking for that, regardless of what they use at that time, the parking requirement would be.
So would the CUP go away?
CUP runs with the land.
That's the problem. So I'm concerned
Madam
about
Chair.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I can just add to that. For conditional use permits, if for any reason they are no longer in compliance with either the conditions of approval or code requirements, they can be revoked by the Planning Commission. So falling out of compliance with parking requirements would be a reason to bring it before the Planning Commission to revoke the conditional use permit. So under both the land use permit and the conditional use permit, staff has the ability to address any default or any deficiency of parking.
And how parked up is Edibles and Premier Gardens? Have you done a study of how much of their parking they use?
Yeah, so yeah, I went there on 3 different occasions to study the parking needs in that location. And again, I spoke with the ownership of Premier Greens. Because of the lesser intensity of their uses, the foot traffic to that location is very minimal. So yeah, that was why staff was in agreement with the parking plan.
How many parking spaces do they currently use?
So about 5 of them.
And what's the surplus?
About 7.
Thank you. Then the second question I have, and it's a series of questions, goes to the concentration of uses and the experience of the Demuth neighborhood, Demuth Park, and you didn't give us distances to the golf course and CV Link. But this appears to have a significant concentration. Where was the initial moratorium before the change in the statute? Did it include this park?
I'll go ahead and address that question. The moratorium that was in place in late 2018, 2019 was not in this specific area. It was in the area around Vela and Williams Road, which is the industrial park that's closer to the Demuth Park neighborhood.
But this is fairly close to the Demuth Park neighborhood. So maybe a question to Mr. Priest. What discretion and authority do we have on this if we find that another cannabis use in this neighborhood is not necessary or beneficial to the neighborhood? We're adding concentration to a neighborhood that's already been pretty impacted.
If the Planning Commission says, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, if the Commission believes that due to an over-concentration of these uses, that this use would be detrimental to other existing uses or to future uses that are permitted in the zone, you can deny the CUP. However, again, I would ask that the Planning Commission make specific findings in that regard based on over-concentration. I'm looking at some of the other findings. It would really be finding number 2 that you would be making that negative finding for if you found it based on over-concentration.
Thank you. That answers my question. Did staff look at this from that perspective? Or is that not your purview?
No, I did look at it, and I and the applicant spoke about it. The relative to that business park itself, although there are 5 permits in that area, 3 of them are functional. They tend to have different uses though. So for instance, the morgue would be the only lounge in that area. But when you go further north, yeah, there are other cannabis related facilities in that area. Yeah, so.
Okay. And I think those are primarily my questions. If we can go to the public hearing. Commissioner Hirschbein, you have more questions?
Yeah, just one. These are tenants, right? They don't own the buildings themselves.
Right. She is listening.
Wouldn't the parking agreement have to be with the landlord rather than an individual tenant?
Okay.
Just to jump in on that question, the property owner who is providing the parking spaces would need to sign the agreement, but it's appropriate for the tenant who needs the parking spaces to be the signatory on that. So it's really the property owner who is providing the parking spaces who needs to sign.
So the landlord would have to sign this as well?
Of the property where the parking spaces are located, the additional parking spaces are located.
And
Wait, I didn't get, so the landlord signs the agreement as well or not? I don't.
Not of the subject property, of the property where they are taking the parking spaces from.
Right.
The property owner must sign that one.
It's all different property owners within the park, is that?
Correct.
Right.
Oh, I thought it was one big owner, I'm sorry.
No, there's separate owners.
Okay, so the owner of the
Premier Greens.
Yeah,
Premier Greens, yeah.
that the owner of that land has to be a signatory to this agreement.
Correct.
Right.
Is that part of the condition, or should we say that?
It was
No,
part of,
So
sorry.
that's something that we would require as part of the land use permit.
Okay, all right, thanks for clarifying that.
And I just have a question on notice. Was the animals shelter noticed? Was the golf course noticed? And were any of the residents that live more than 1,000 feet noticed about this?
Well, I know that we went by the code requirement of noticing 1,000 feet radius of the site.
So then you didn't notice any of
If they did not fall within the mile radius, chances are they did not.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we
yeah.
also have the city's odor control consultant, if there are any questions for him.
And I would have questions. The previous odor control consultant indicated that the carbon filtering was not adequate and additional measures might be required, but the new study doesn't indicate that. And so one of the questions I think Commissioner Song asked, if he could address any differences between this odor plan, which would have fit the 2019, but what we require now, and any of his comments regarding what the previous odor consultant required.
So, Madam Chair, if I may say, I'm sorry, if I may say something to that effect real quick, the applicant did hire a different engineer who prepared a completely different odor control plan.
I see. Okay. Commissioner Song, but we do have the odor consultant. So are these questions directed to the odor consultant, Commissioner Song?
Yes, they are. But before that, I want to confirm one more question with Edward, if I may.
Certainly.
In this industrial business center, Morgue will have about less than 700 square feet for manufacturing and growing. With the other businesses, do you recall how many square footages do we also have for manufacturing and growing?
I can do a quick check on that. Can I come back to you on that?
Sure.
Commissioner?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you had questions for the odor control consultant, Commissioner Song, did you?
Yes.
If you would raise those before we hear from them.
Sure. So the question is, I believe you have reviewed the application when it was submitted in August of 2019. And in their plans, oh, you have not, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Our first review occurred last week.
Just could you identify yourself for the public?
No,
Your
my
name?
apologies, Madam Chair. My name is Jay Tackett. I'm with 15,000 Incorporated. We're the city's odor control consultant.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, our first review of this project occurred last week. We are actually to blame for the latest delay in this meeting, that we needed some time to review it. This was previously reviewed by a previous engineer. We did not review the original one. This is our first look at it just recently.
Thank you.
If you could speak to the plan itself, and also, are there any differences between this plan because they are submitting from 2019 and what we currently require?
Yes, it picks up the vast majority of the current requirements. I would like to just step back and address the comment about the previous engineer asking for additional requirements. We found that the additional requirements that other engineers have been looking for were masking agents or ionizers. Those were approaches we've looked at in the past, and we've come to the conclusion that cascading pressure and odor mitigation through activated carbon is the appropriate measures, which is why we don't recommend anything additional and why our review looks slightly different than the previous engineers. The main differences between this plan, and we haven't reviewed the original plan, but we did briefly look at it. But this new plan complies largely with the new requirements. The only caveat where it does not is in the dilution of discharge of the positively pressurized air. That is a requirement we have for cultivation. We do not require that for lounges or distribution. And we do not, and this is probably something we should address, we do not make a distinction for micro business, which this is the license, the cultivation license that they're applying under. So the physical size of it is obvious limitations to the ability to generate odor. But it largely complies with the new requirements. It is missing that one element of dilution at discharge that we would normally require for a type 1 cultivation. This is a type 2A.
And is that difficult to add that? Is it expensive?
No. It's expensive is a relative term. I can't speak to that, but it is not difficult. It is a standard product that is, it's part of your city standards, and I would see that as a reasonable condition.
Commissioner Song.
Mr. Takas, you mentioned that the filtration system is not required at the lounges, but isn't the applicant showing that equipment in the current lounges?
The dilution is not required at the lounges. The filtration we still require.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for the odor consultant? Thank you very much. I think the matter is now a public hearing. Public hearing will be
Madam
open.
Chair, I'm sorry, real quick, may I respond to Commissioner Song's question?
Yes.
Okay, so for Premier Green, the manufacturing area is 757 square feet. That's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The public hearing is now open. The applicant has 10 minutes. Members of the public will have 3 minutes, and then the applicant will have 3 minutes for rebuttal. Mr. Newell, do we have people who've indicated they wish to speak?
No one has contacted us directly, but I'd ask that anyone who is on the Zoom call tonight, if you wish to speak during this hearing, please raise your hand and the icon or the reaction button, or send me a chat and I can make sure you have the opportunity to speak after the applicant.
The applicant has 10 minutes. Is the applicant here?
Yes, I'm Stephen. I'm the engineer on Julie's project.
Thank you.
Right. I'd like to begin. I'm going to share my screen. I do have a presentation. Let's see here. All right. Does everybody see my screen?
I think that's a yes.
Okay. So good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Stephen Viatic. I'm the mechanical engineer handling Julie Canby's project. It's called Evolved Engineering. The layout, the odor control design, and many aspects of the project are very similar to a project previously approved at a different location. That was my project, Reefer Madness. So Evolve's plan uses all organic nutrients, no chemicals, no pesticides, nothing like that. The grow will be small, and the products will be sold in Evolve's dispensary right there on site. The manufacturing method is a Rawson press, which is very simple and safe. Buds are squeezed in the press, and the juice that comes out is collected in 1 gram jars, and that's sold to customers is what they call wax. Evolved also intends on making clean clones as part of their manufacturing method using tissue culture. Julie Canby, the owner of this business, she is a major in biology, and she intends to do some research in that area. Let's see here. Evolved also, they're a vertically integrated business. They already have an approved state license for the micro business. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So this is the site plan, and as you can see in the aerial photo, it's sort of an industrial park within, it's kind of an island there in the desert. There isn't very much around it, at least within the 1,000 feet. So Jeff Livingston, the owner of Premier Edibles, has graciously allowed Evolved to use his parking, as was discussed in the meeting earlier. Premier produces chocolates and gummies. They're located at 1233 and 1235. That's going to be this one here and this one here, which together have 25 parking spaces. Presently, I believe they're only manufacturing in the 1235, this one here, leaving this one vacant for future. So I did some calculations. My calculations were similar to Edwards there, and I was estimating that we needed that 1 additional parking spot. I believe Edwards' estimates were around 3, so it's somewhere between 1 and 3. There are, so currently Premier Edibles is only using about 8 spots by my calculation. And if they did expand to utilize every single square foot, then by design, there would still be about 9 extra surplus spaces that could be shared with Evolved. And again, the cultivation space is very tiny. It's 633 square feet, which, by the code and by the design, that use right there just requires only 1 parking spot. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. There were some comments about the CCNRs, I believe. So we did a little look at that. So the CCNRs from 1985, they did specify that reciprocal right to parking is allowed. And Julie's attorney took a look at this, and they agreed that a plan like this is okay. Let's see here. The other piece of the plan, they intend on having a security guard on site all the time. That's actually a requirement for the dispensaries. And we will have this, Evolved will have this security guard assist with directing customers to Premier Edibles and Evolved, so they are parking in their appropriate places and not upsetting any neighbors. This is something that I'm doing with my business already. I own Reefer Madness, and we find that when security is involved with roving the parking areas, that it keeps everyone happy and just keeps everybody doing the right thing. We move on to the next slide here. This is the floor plan, and as we can see, the cultivation area right here, it's completely encapsulated in its own box, which is essentially double contained. It's airtight sealed with NPR panels. Those are panels that are similar to what's used in hospitals, clean rooms, kitchens. It's very cleanable. It's waterproof. It's airtight. It's made from recycled plastic. So just outside that box is these odor-controlled hallways that make up an odor-free air barrier. This odor-free air is achieved through the carbon filters that Jay talked about. And there are many of them in the facility, as I'll show you here in the following slide. So on the ends of the cultivation space, there are rooms that are heavily filtered with these carbon filters. The carbon filter design looks like this right here. Also, there's this vestibule on the end here, which serves as a triple air barrier against the outside world. And it also seals up the existing garage door, which is not going to be used. As far as attic or drop ceiling space, there's no attic or drop ceiling space where odors can accumulate. As far as any painting, if painting will be done, they'll use latex paint, which odors don't adhere to that like other permeable paints. So there's going to be about 20 of these 12-inch diameter carbon filters attached to 1,700 CFM fans. 2 of them function as scrubbed exhaust, while the rest are recirculating the air. It is a fail-safe design that utilizes redundancy because there are 2 filters that exhaust to the outside, and they are the largest size possible. If one of them fails for some reason, the other one is adequate in size to do the job on its own. And there will also be technicians on site that will be performing daily checklists to ensure that there are no issues arising with the filters, and if there is, then it will be corrected right away. So this filter design is very similar to what I use at my dispensary, Reefer Madness, and we've actually found that the carbon filters work so well that we can leave the front door open and we don't have a detectable odor outside. As a matter of fact, on the inside, if I'm gone for a while and I come back, inside, I notice a very faint smell, if sometimes even no smell. So these filters are very effective and the best in my opinion. Moving on to this slide here. So this is the cross-section diagram that elaborates upon those the airlock and the vestibules. And the other piece that I forgot to mention, there is a negative pressure gradient going between these walls because one of the filters exhausts to the outside. It's pulling air through those walls to where if there was a crack or something, or if a door was left open, there's no odor traveling to the outside. It's only air traveling, fresh air traveling in. The blue areas here, you can see those are the odor-free air barriers that are achieved through carbon filtration. And I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So I've summarized the grow process. So the life cycle of a cannabis plant is about 112 days in most scenarios. So 8 weeks are spent in veg, 8 weeks are spent in flowering. The flowering stage produces a little bit more odor than the veg. Most facilities harvest a large group of plants from flowering all at the same time, and that results in a burst of odor. So what Evolved is proposing is not that they're going to harvest everything at once, but rather they're going to have at most 100 plants at any given time. The age of each plant is going to be staggered by about a day. So they're only going to be harvesting at most like 1 plant a day, which is a very manageable amount of odor, which is going to be controlled by all these systems I've described. And then I'm going to move on here to the last slide. This is their micro business license, which they did obtain in 2019. They met all the prerequisites. They notified the water boards. They notified the local tribes. They went through everything, all the right ways to get their permit. And I've engineered the odor control system, the best possible odor control system for this scenario. The conditional use permit that was submitted, as we talked about before, it was before the date at which they changed the ordinance, which says that new applications for cannabis and type 6 manufacturing, cultivation and manufacturing wouldn't be allowed in the M1 zone. We were active in the meetings leading up to the adoption of this ordinance, and it's my understanding that because Evolved applied when they did, they were grandfathered in. That was set at City Council, and therefore I'm asking that all these activities that are requested for the business, should please be allowed. The proposed manufacturing and cultivation, again, are tiny, around 633 square feet. Smaller facilities do produce less odor, and this is probably one of the smallest in Palm Springs. I think that's everything I've covered. Thank you for your time, and please approve. I am available for questions, and Julie, the owner, is also available, and her husband, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newell, are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
No other requests, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Can we take this, close the screen on this and on the business license?
Oh.
If you could.
I'm going to quit sharing here in just a sec.
Thank you. Since there are no, you have 3 minutes for rebuttal. Since there are no members of the public who have requested to speak, do you have a rebuttal? And if not, I'll open it to questions from the commission.
I think I've covered everything. We're ready for the next steps.
Thank you. Are there members of the commission who have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Song.
If the applicant decides to change the method from rosin press to another manufacturing, would that require a larger square footage, or the applicant has made such a big investment with the rosin press that it will be nearly impossible to change the manufacturing process? That's one question. Second question is, why two separate lounges? Are they for different purpose? Third question is, what are your business hours during the week and during the weekend? Fourth question is, I think I heard this, but if you can clarify if there will be wayfindings or parking signages so that the public or the staff knows where to park. That's all my questions. Thank you.
I want to take them one at a time, Commissioner Song.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just repeat your first question and then go through it.
You mean you don't remember? No, okay. Let me start with the first one. What are your business hours for the week and the weekend?
So the proposed hours are 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday, so every day of the week.
Okay. Have you looked at the site lighting system, and is it safe and you can find your ways around from entry door to parking spaces?
I have been there at night, and it is lit. I think sufficient, but that's definitely something that we will look at.
Okay, and do you plan to have a signage or a wayfinding program? I know you have not submitted that right now, but in order for staff or the public to know where to park.
Correct. Yes. So we plan on installing signs on the Evolved side, as well as signs that designate that it's okay for Evolved or Premier to park in the opposing spots. And then we'll additionally have a security guard on site that assists with the customer's parking.
Okay, so you're currently using the rosin press for manufacturing. Would it be nearly impossible for you to change the method?
So the rosin press is the method that I'm most familiar with. There are other methods that use, chemicals that we don't intend on using. Those methods do require additional space which we don't really have because of how small we're proposing the cultivation manufacturing area. So really, it is going to be locked in with this use, the Rawson press. We could get different types of Rawson presses. There are larger ones, but when I say larger, it may be double the size of this one. It's really not going to take up any more area.
Okay, and the reason for two different lounges or separated lounges are?
Sure. So the lounge area at the north side is like the primary area where customers will be able to hang out and consume edibles or smoke cannabis. The back area was more intended for if there was some kind of show or something like that, or perhaps local artists may come in and display some artwork. And that area can be there's a door, so it can be closed off, and the front area can operate all the time, whereas the back area can be closed off, and artists can spend some time displaying their stuff, and then it can be opened at appropriate times when a show is in place.
Okay, and Madam Chair, I don't know if I could ask this question, but the applicant has reviewed the conditions by staff and knows and agrees that they are going to provide accordingly, such as the trash enclosure.
That's correct. Yeah, we're more than happy to make adjustments to the plan and add a trash enclosure so that we don't have to rely on others. We're completely okay with that.
Okay, and one last question is, to the volume that you have where you do the cultivation and the manufacturing is almost a 2-story volume. You need that for the lighting or the equipment necessary to do cultivation. So therefore, it would be nearly impossible to, at future time, wanting to divide that space and make it into a 1-story and 2-story space. Is that correct?
Let me make sure I understand the question. So you're wondering if the cultivation and manufacturing area could be expanded or split in some way. Is that correct?
In which situation would that be possible or not possible?
I guess so. The way it's designed, we're going to be limited to the 633 square foot footprint. Now the size of the box, I think, is about 16 or 17 feet high. So it is a tall ceiling to where we could theoretically put things in racks. We could have things stored up above the plants, or could potentially have one row of plants above another. But initially, we don't intend on doing that. We intend on just using the base floor area, and that's sufficient to what we need.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there other questions? Then I have one. Are you amenable to adding a dilution of discharge?
Yes, that's perfectly fine. I understand that that's something that would be a double, fail safe, and ensure that we're pumping out very fresh air, and we're totally fine with that.
Thank you. There being no other questions, the matter is before the commission for general discussion and then motions. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Song.
Personally, I'm hoping that this is one of the last projects related with manufacturing and cultivation. But as a business owner and planning commissioner, as far as the entire city, the applicant has submitted the application and has gone with the city a process over a year of updating and providing the information necessary. And because the size is limited and because of the number of issues that I would like to make it into conditions, I'm leaning towards accepting this project with the conditions of the staff.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
So I don't want what I'm saying to be construed as I'm supporting the project. I might, I'm just not sure yet. But if it is approved, I'd like, or if there's a motion to approve, I'd like one of the conditions, and I think it indicates on a section drawing that there is a new ceiling in the cultivation room, but it's never called out. And I just want to make sure it's on page P like Paul 2.2, and it shows the cross-section cultivation and manufacturing enclosure on the lower level. The walls are called out in plan, but nowhere does it say that's a new ceiling to be installed there. So I just want to make sure that that's, if it reaches a motion to approve, I want to make sure that's a condition.
Other comments? Commissioner Irvin, did you want to make comments?
Yeah. This is it's pretty interesting. The concentration in certain areas, it's alarming, a little bit concerning. A lot of these projects tend to go in the M1 zone in the industrial areas, and you will find out that a lot of these industrial areas have low income, and so we have a bigger problem, an actual that we can deal with than what we can deal with as a planning commission, because it's a bigger situation, being the fact that we know that as an urban planner, these areas, these projects are just going to have to keep coming because a lot of the industrial areas are in those concentrated areas. So I'm just concerned with the fact that there's 3 more coming. And also one of them is on Williams, which is close to that community as well. I mean, just looking from the presentation, it's a school there, it's a park there, it's a community there. We just have to be careful, and I don't know, I'm not leaning each one way yet, but I'm leaning a little bit more on the denial side. But I don't want to say anything yet, so that's just my comments.
Vice Chair Marizzi.
I have a question for staff. This application falls under the previous ordinance, correct?
That's correct.
In the previous ordinance, were there issues related to concentration that this meets, or is it in the new? I'm trying to understand. I remember there were issues regarding concentration, and that was a point of discussion we've had in the past. But does it apply to this particular grandfathered application?
That's correct, and it does meet the separation requirements in addition to not being restricted by concentration.
So under the new ordinance, would it also meet those?
No, under the new ordinance, the manufacturing and cultivation uses would not be allowed.
Well, that's right. They moved near the freeway.
Correct.
Right. But we're looking at this from the previous. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't. This is a comment. I don't think it would be fair to the applicants who've been, dealing with this since 2018 in the city to penalize them for the concentration if at that time when they made the application there wasn't a requirement that there be fewer manufacturing operations in that area. So if this meets if it meets the ordinance that existed at that time, I would say that it's appropriate that we do approve this.
I'm just going to comment. I'm uncomfortable with approval, in part because the area adjacent to it, although this was an exception, was in a moratorium area because there had been so much concentration in the Demuth Park area. And this, even though there's a 1,000-foot limit under the old ordinance, it is very close to residences, and it's close to really significant and important uses for the city, the CV Link, the golf course, Demuth Park, the animal shelter, where people are outside enjoying, to the extent they can, the air, with the exception of the fact that there's a sewage treatment plant that already disturbs the air in that area. But if it is approved, I agree with Commissioner Hirschbein that the ceiling should be included, and also the dilution of discharge, and it was very graciously offered by the applicant. My concern really is one for the Demuth Park area. And it's also a concern for the concentration in this little industrial park, which is turning quickly into a cannabis park. I wouldn't have difficulties with the all of the uses except for the grow. But it's the cultivation that is an issue for me. So that's throwing that in the discussion, Commissioner Maruzzi.
If the concern is regarding odor, I think that's been addressed by our consultant, and there won't be an odor issue. So why is the concentration, I'm just trying to understand this, why would the concentration be an issue if there's not an odor problem?
I guess because our odor plans aren't fail-safe, and in the Demuth Park area, there has been a consistent problem with odors that are strong enough that you smell it when you drive down the street coming from the airport.
Is that still the case?
People have reported that to me. So it's a concern for the complete use of our industrial parks, where cannabis will take over our industrial parks. And the other concern is the potential for odors for neighbors.
But just to finish my thought on this, if we have an odor consultant and we have requirements for odor, but we don't feel that they're adequate or they're going to work, why are we, seems to be inconsistency here. It's not fair to the applicant to say, well, we require these particular mechanical installations, but we don't really think that it's going to always work. I don't know.
Madam Chair, if I may, to Mr. Maruzzi's point, when we spoke earlier about overconcentration, if there's going to be odor, if there's going to be some element of this overconcentration that will be detrimental to other properties, will not be a good fit in the immediate area, that could be grounds for denial. However, if it's just just numerical overconcentration, but we believe that its impacts will be fully mitigated through an odor control plan or other controls that are placed on the project, then the overconcentration just in theory is not necessarily a basis to deny. We would still have to have findings that this is going to add odor or this is going to add impact in such a way that now we're over-concentrating the impact. But again, there would have to be a finding that there's some impact that this is contributing to that's not being properly mitigated. I might suggest if we talk to the odor control specialist or odor control plan gentleman and perhaps get his thoughts.
I think that Commissioner Irvin had a comment first.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of jump in.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to jump in there quickly. So from a practical standpoint, we have to take into consideration as well, children having access to being able to have cannabis, youth having access to cannabis available to them at every corner. That's something that's concerning, as well as just the concentration aspect of it. That's something that we can't ignore either. We have to pay attention to the practical standpoint of it. It meets everything that it needs to meet, but do we want to have cannabis on every corner for our youth to just be able to go get cannabis and can't, get any, once again, fresh food or anything like that, but they can get access to cannabis on every single corner. So a lounge will also bring different type of traffic to the community as well. Hanging outside of the lounge, you can have different types of situations in those communities.
Madam Chair, if I may address Commissioner Irvin's concerns. Again, if the concern is that this is going to bring an overconcentration of impact, it's going to bring more impact to the area in the way of odor, some sort of land use inconsistency, some sort of security issue or something like that, then the Planning Commission can deny based on finding 2. I would point out, however, that if it's a more generalized concern about cannabis being too readily available, or that it's not in keeping with certain policy, that policy has been set by the city council through distance restrictions, zoning restrictions, and through the codified ordinances that we have. So I would advise that, again, if there's going to be a denial, it needs to be something that's specific to this project, an impact it's bringing that would prevent you from making that finding, as opposed to a generalized policy concern that maybe we need more distance restrictions. That would be something to bring to the city council as policy, rather than denying this specific project.
Commissioner Hirschbein had a comment, and then I think somebody asked that the odor consultant weigh in.
I would like to address Commissioner Maruzzi's comment about, well, if it controls the odor, then what is the issue? Well, if it controls the odor, then why did council pass an ordinance saying that manufacturing and cultivation has to be out by the freeway? I mean, if it was a fail-safe process, there'd be no reason to have those kinds of restrictions. I think the recognition by council is that there are certain problems inherent in this and that it's not fail-safe. And I think that's sort of where I'm coming down on it, that there is a general recognition by council that these kind of facilities can create problems. They don't always create problems. Sometimes they may not, sometimes they may. But to say they never do would fly in the face of the logic of creating a zone where virtually no one lives to restrict it into that area.
Shall we continue the discussion, or does anyone want to hear more from the odor consultant? Commissioner Maruzzi.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the odor consultant, but just to think through some of these comments. In terms of what Commissioner Irvin brought up, if this was near a neighborhood, this is if I'm correct, this is an industrial area, manufacturing. I mean, I've driven past it. I wouldn't think that it's and there's already a number of lounges in this area, I believe. Is that correct? Isn't the Premier, is that a lounge also? What is it, the one across the way?
No, the Premier doesn't have a lounge, no.
Or are there any lounges in this area?
No, they are mostly transportation and distribution.
So this would be something, this lounge would be something new in this area.
Correct.
Huh. I don't know. I'm just gonna, I'd like to hear what the odor control consultant has to say, but my thinking is we're changing the rules halfway through the process, and I just don't think it's appropriate to do that. I don't think it's fair.
Can I call on the odor control consultant?
Absolutely.
Is this fail-safe?
Nothing's fail-safe. I can speak directly to the lack of enforcement of just about every jurisdiction to enforce conditions of approval from multiple public bodies. We often see a disconnect between required by codes and what is live in the field. One of the things we've recommended to the city in the past is to provide an enforcement procedure for odor mitigation. And while nothing is fail-safe, I think it's important to talk to the particulars of this site. This is a 630 some odd square foot grow. And I think it's important to speak to the math a little bit of what that means as far as airflow and what you'd be expecting to see discharged to the exterior of the building. In a 630 square foot grow, the amount of ventilation air is going to be set by the building codes. Many engineers, including our from outside of the city of Palm Springs, will advocate for reducing the amount of ventilation required in a space because we deem that a process activity and not a normally occupied area. That being said, that artificially and realistically suppresses the amount of outside air ventilation that we have to bring into a cultivation space. Once we reduce that amount of outside air, that reduces the amount of air we discharge to the atmosphere. Everything we can do to limit the amount of ventilation air within a space is beneficial, provided we're not sacrificing human safety and occupant safety. So with a space like this, 630 square feet, there you have to do real ventilation calcs, but back of the envelope is usually about 0.1 CFM per square foot of ventilation. So we're looking at about 60 CFM, 60 cubic feet per minute of required air that we would bring into the space for ventilation for occupants. At that moment, we have positive pressurized that room. We want to get rid of that space. Those pressure cascades are on Stephen's drawings, and that we're now discharging 60 CFM of odorous air. We're asking for that to be diluted. So that would be diluted at a 7-to-1 ratio. We're looking at 420 CFM. Give you an example. The general exhaust fan in most people's bathrooms is about 100 CFM. So the amount of air that we're looking to treat for this specific 630 square feet grow is less than the amount of air than you would see in a typical residential bathroom.
That's helpful. Can you just go to the enforcement procedure in terms of your opinion? Because that's really been with the larger grows and the ones that are difficult, that really has been the issue, is they don't enforce in the middle of the night. And air is discharged in the middle of, it's discharged, and by the time they get there, it's not there, but it's been impacting school children, families, businesses in the area.
Yeah, generally, these are all static processes. So any activity that's occurring is a 24/7 activity for cultivation. There's not really any time to discharge air. The goal is to ultimately not bring in ventilation air from the outside, is to reduce it to the minimal amount. Any grower will attest that they want to limit the amount of microbials and amount of ventilation air brought outside for contaminants and all sorts of reasons. So as speaking to the enforcement, what we've recommended and what we do recommend is a few administrative checks. And then we've provided I think I talked about it before COVID, to be honest, but there was administrative checks that we've recommended, along with some physical checks that we recommend for large cannabis operators that are subject to the dilution aspects of the odor control plan, because it's important that these pieces of mechanical equipment are proven. And what we have asked for, what we've proposed in the past, is when we do require things like pressure cascading and dilution, that in that we're also asking for, and it's embedded in building codes, a little bit beyond the purview of the Planning Commission. We're expecting the building code to be flushed out, and we're getting a balanced report of the airflows within that building. So at that point, we have an administrative check that we can. Right now, there's nobody doing that because no jurisdiction does that right now for testing and balance reports and commissioning and things of that nature. But for sensitive issues like this, I think it might be worth exploring to have some sort of administrative check and some sort of physical enforcement of what the conditions that were applied to the projects are still being upheld.
We have in our conditions, let me ask you that, we had a checking of the equipment, which I'm assuming is specific to the processing and manufacturing equipment, the odor controls at 1 month, 3 months, and then every other year. Is that the kind of check you want? What do we need?
Yeah, that was actually what we had proposed to the city as far as what we would see as a good guideline that would have a pretty good, it would have good confidence from the city's perspective that the applicant was fulfilling the obligations of the plan, and it wouldn't be a major impact to the applicant because we're not looking for physical inspections at 3, 6, 12, and 24 months. We'd be looking for administrative checks. And then only at a year, I believe, I'd have to go back and look at what we'd written up, but at a year, go in and physically look at what has been installed and make sure it's operating, and then have a recertification process at that point.
Flynn, going to you, the checks that he's suggesting, those sound slightly different than the ones we have in our conditions.
That's correct. In our conditions, it is a physical inspection at 1, 3, and 6 months. And what I heard Mr. Takix just indicate is that the physical inspection would be once a year. Ours is perhaps a little more aggressive than what he is suggesting. I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing where there are concerns.
But
yeah, and we always default to the more aggressive one. We would immediately default to the more aggressive plan.
So if we changed it to once a year thereafter, as opposed to once every 2 years thereafter, that would fit the kinds of checks he's talking about. Because our condition says once every 2 years thereafter.
Yeah. So we could modify that condition should you choose to do so.
Commissioner Song, I was going to say something, but.
I just wanted to clarify. Mr. Takis is talking about a testing and balance of air in and air out. Mm-hmm. And the conditions that we have is to check physically the HVAC equipment. So checking physically the HVAC equipment versus actually doing a balance test is, I believe, two different things. And what I was going to propose that in the conditions of approval, that not only do we have a physical test, but we also have an air balance check in order to meet the intent of the permit plans for mechanical distribution and equipment system. And I know it's a big investment, but at the first month, we will know if the equipment is not balanced. We have a chance to catch it within the first month. And then the third month is to make sure that it's still running. And then I think we had it at 6 months, and then it went every other year. Yearly. So that's what I would feel comfortable if we were to approve this project.
What I was going to say to this is that this is a very small grow. It is in an isolated area away from the neighborhood. I don't think the lounge on coming off of Gene Autry would have the same impact as a lounge in the middle of the neighborhood. And if we can make sure that the equipment works, my concern was really the pickleball players, the children who are playing ball, they're involved in ball games, our bike riders, our golfers. If we can have a way of continuing to check the air, I think I could get to a yes on this with the changes that Commissioner Song suggested and our odor control consultant suggested to the reviews. The change in the ceiling, the dilution system, adding the dilution system, and any other conditions that Commissioner Song suggests, because I think she has some.
It sounds like a beginning of a motion.
It's the beginning of a motion.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to approve the project based on, should I go one by one?
Yes.
Okay. That it is stated that rosin press is the type of manufacturing system that will be used for this business. That the manufacturing and cultivation area would remain as one-story volume with its own appropriate or dedicated ceiling, apart from the building structure. That the dilution discharge is also included as part of the mechanical system. That at end of first month of business operation, a testing balance of the mechanical system is provided. And therefore, after that, it would be every year. Kathy, I'm doing a hybrid, but I'll just state it at that. As the applicant has mentioned, they will have wayfindings and signage that will be submitted separately, and they will also confirm that there is safe lighting in the parking lot, since their hours of business are going after sundown. And the last one I had was if the business is to be sold to somebody else and the conditions, the CUP applies, that there will be a staff check that the business is run according to the plans that was originally approved with the original CUP. That's my motion.
And on parking?
Oh, I'm sorry, in part, thank you. And that the landlord provides a letter of, a letter in which allows the parking program usage of their of excess parking spaces.
So that would be provided by Edibles and Premier Gardens, the owner of that. Commissioner Maruzzi?
Yeah, I would be glad to second that motion. I think those are very reasonable requests and requirements. I'm certainly mindful of the idea that, or the concern that Commissioner Irvin has raised. And if it was in the Williams neighborhood, Williams area street, that's so much closer to the school and neighborhoods, I would agree that that's just, the concentration there is too much. But in this case, I think it seems fair since they did this before the rules were changed.
And if this were a larger grow, I wouldn't be inclined to approve it. It's because it's a micro business with less chance of impact on the recreational use of the area around it. It's the fairness argument and the micro nature. Are there any other comments or requested additions? Should we call the roll?
Commissioner Song,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mosey,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Yes.
and Chair Wormick.
Yes. Just a question before we wrap this up. Flynn, you have all of the conditions that we mentioned?
Yes, I have all 8 added conditions of approval. We'll ask Mr. Takix to assist us with the language for the condition relative to the dilution discharge, just to make sure we get that correct. And then also relative to the balance check of the air system. So we've got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, on this. Okay, moving right along, we have a new business item. Does anybody need a break before we go to the new business item? Commissioner Hirschbein, you would like a 10-minute break? We'll reconvene at 7:30.
Thank you all. It's good seeing you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. you. I'm calling the March 24th, 2021 meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission back to order. Our next item is new business. The Woodridge Pacific Group LLC for an approval of final development plans for an additional 44 single-family residential units within the planning area 4A of Phase 1 of the Mural development located at 801 Sunrise Way. Staff report, please.
Edward, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Warminka, members of the Planning Commission. So this item is being presented to you as a final development plans for an additional 44 single-family residential lots. So you will recall that on November 11, 2018, you approved an initial 44 single-family residential lots for Woodridge Pacific. That 44 lots is located on the southeasterly portion of Mural. Those lots are currently under construction. We have completed a series of final inspection on completed homes there. This additional 44 lots will be located on the southwesterly portion of Mural. And the applicant has decided to use the same elevation that you have previously reviewed, that was previously reviewed by both AAC and the Planning Commission. The reason we're bringing this back to you is that these are additional 44 lots and they have to be on the record. So that's why it's been presented to you tonight. I'm going to try to share my screen again to share some slides with you. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, Madam Chair, this is the overall site plan of Mural. This is the area that you previously reviewed and approved for 44 lots. And all of these are within the Phase 1 area of Mural. So the first 44 lots are located in area 4B. The one that before you tonight is within area 4A, also in Phase 1. Just to give you a little background of this development projects in this area. So this is by Woodridge Pacific, and this will also be by Woodridge Pacific. The ones to the north of the multi-family area will be by Gallery Homes. The construction documents were submitted to both building and planning 2 weeks ago. The lots to the southern area that borders San Rafael area, it's by Christopher Homes. Those are also under construction as we speak. Staff has conducted final inspections on the model homes, and other units are also under construction as we speak. So this is these are the plot plan for the 44 lots that are before you tonight. They will be facing Taylor Drive. And again, these are 44 lots. The plot plans are a little bit staggered to make it more interesting and different than the initial 44 lots. They are proposing 5 different floor plans with 3 elevations each for these units. And the sizes will range from 2,027 square feet to 2,809 square feet. Plant 1, 2, 3, and 5 are all single story buildings, and plan 4 will be 2-story buildings. So I'm just going to share some slides with you real quick of the plans that you have seen before. So if they look familiar to you, it is because you review these through AAC subcommittees and eventually by the Planning Commission. So this is Plan 1A. This is the 3D rendering of it, and these are the sides, the rear elevation of Plan 1A. So this is Plan 1B. It is the same theme here, single family residence and the rendering, and of course the side, the rear, and the rear drawings. This is Plan 1C, same thing. So this slide here indicates the color selection and of course the floor plan. They are all 3 bedrooms each, just like the initial 44 lots that you reviewed previously. The landscaping design is similar to the ones you saw before. The front yard typicals are exactly the same. The plant material are all selected from the Mural design guidelines. So staff has reviewed the new 44 drawings, has evaluated them against the Mural design guidelines and also the ones that you previously saw. So the next slide here is Plan 2A, slightly different than the first 3 elevations. And here is Plan 2B. This is Plan 2C. And these are the color selections for Plan 2. And of course, the floor plan 2. Here is the perspective for Plan 3A on the rear, and then the 2 side drawings. This is Plan 3B, and then the rear and the left and the right side drawings. This is Plan 3C. The materials are exactly the same as previously reviewed and approved, and also are consistent with the Mural design guidelines. These are the color selection for Plan 3 and the floor plan. This is Plan 4A, the 2-story building. As I mentioned, you recall you did impose a condition on the maximum size of the 2nd floor. This is also consistent with with that condition that you imposed when you reviewed the initial 44 lots in planning area 4B. This is Plan 4B. This is the perspective, and of course, the sides and the rear. This is Plan 4C. And these are the color selections and the floor plans for the 1st floor and the 2nd floor. This is Plan 5A perspective. So this is a single story. As I mentioned earlier, this will be the rear. This is the rear drawing, and these are the 2 sides, both right and the left side drawings. This is Plan 5B, different colors and different materials. 5C, and on the rear, the 2 sides. So this will be the color selection for Plan 5 and the floor plan. And as I mentioned, the front yard landscape are consistent with what you previously saw, and the plant selections are also consistent with the plantings from the mural on landscape plan. This will be typical of the model, same as what was built in the initial area in area 44B. So that will conclude my brief presentation. Staff is available to answer any questions. The applicant is also on the Zoom tonight, so if you have any question, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If you can remove the comments from the screen.
Okay.
Why don't I open this up for comments from the commission or questions of staff? It isn't a public hearing, and people can let me know if they have questions for the applicant. But I'd rather take initial comments first and questions of staff and then go to the applicant. Commissioner Song.
Just one question. On the exhibit where you show the different phases, phase 4, phase 2, phase 5, right before the entrance to, I think it's called a flare, it says private gated entry. Is there a separate entry to the flare development?
No, there is none. There is just one entrance into the phase 1 area.
So there's not a gate. So this the exhibit that was shown for the different phases where it identifies private gated entry is incorrect.
None. So
okay. So just to confirm, the gates are on Sunrise. I'm sorry. The gates are,
I'm sorry. Yeah, there is a gate on Sunrise. There's a gate along Indian Canyon.
And that's it, right?
Correct.
No, there's also a gate on
Avenida Caballeros. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And so I think the label is just misplaced.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hirschbein, you had comments or a question?
No, it was just, I noticed the same thing, and it's pointing to that Avenida Caballeros entrance. So that's all I wanted to point out.
Are there other comments or questions of staff? There being none, I have a couple. One question for staff: the clubhouse is not yet open. It was supposed to be open around the time the first unit was sold. What's the status?
So it's completed. Staff conducted a final inspection on the clubhouse on
While Mr. Robertson is looking for that date, the master developer has indicated that the clubhouse is expected to open within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we conducted the final inspection at the clubhouse on March 9th, 2021. So it is complete.
Well, I think.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I still had the floors, but I'll recognize Commissioner Hirschbein next. I went out there and spent a good deal of time. I was really pleased with most of the project. I thought it was stunning. I'm thrilled that you've sold out. I definitely think we should approve it. I do have a couple of concerns, and I'll throw them out. One, and I think this is just my thinking, I think we should probably have a subcommittee to deal with it. One of the major concerns was the exclusive use common area was often obstructed with a swimming pool. There wasn't a clear entry into it. And I think we should look at the plans in subcommittee and make sure that the entry down through the exclusive use common area and to the pathways is open and not obstructed with a pool and that there's a clear pathway down. That was a condition that I think we were all pleased with that exclusive use, but we would like it to be usable. And I thought it turned out much better than I had even hoped for. It really looks great. It's just that in some of the units, it's not usable. The other things I saw, I have concerns about Plan 5. I did walk through all the plans. I requested that even though they weren't all in models. And I think the front entry on Plan 5 should be revisited. It makes for a very awkward entry into the property through a hallway. It sort of distorts the living room. I have concerns about that model. Think probably it could be redone, but the center entry that we'd approved doesn't appear to work. And there were a couple of things that I would like to ask the applicant about. I received information that the window manufacturer, ABC, I tried opening the windows and sliders, and I live in a property that was built probably in 2004, and my windows were in bad shape because they're not aluminum. These windows were more awkward to use than mine were at 16 years. They don't open well. They appear to stick. And I have heard that there are complaints, serious complaints about the windows being warped and the condition and the willingness of the window manufacturer, ABC, to stand by their windows, that apparently they go out of business. They set up a separate LLC for each project. So I have concerns about that. I was thrilled to learn, and this is sort of not in my purview, but I'll still mention it. I was thrilled to learn that people with children are moving in. They consider the project safe for their children, a nice place to move into in Palm Springs. And I just like to ask the developer to consider doing a bathtub option in the main bathroom so that people can bathe their kids if they're moving into the projects and have that kind of option. That was probably the only thing I saw missing. I liked everything that I saw. These are minor things. One closet was too narrow, but those are minor. But the more major things in approving it, I would like to work on the access to the exclusive use common areas and on Plan 5. And I wanted to raise the concern about the windows with the applicant. I don't know if the applicant wants to respond to any of that, or Commissioner Hirschbein had questions. Would you like to respond to any of that?
Sure. Thank you. I'm Todd Cunningham. I'm president of Woodridge. Yeah, these plans were approved 2.5 years ago, roughly. And the colors, we went through probably 5 different meetings between AAC and the Planning Commission, and then I think 6 with the City Council. It was pretty well vetted out, and we're happy with the plans. We're happy with the project. We just want to continue with the product that we currently are building on another 44 lots. Use the same model complex that exists. We've spent $1.5 million in that model complex, and it just makes sense for us to continue with the product that we're already building on lots that are identical in size and orientation to the first 44 lots. So that's our plan. As far as the Plan 5, we've sold a lot of Plan 5s. In fact, we're sold out of Plan 5s. So I don't know, the market seems to be fine with that product. I don't have a problem with that Plan 5. We have a Plan 3 and a Plan 5, which are similar size, single story, pools in the rear. One entry is on the side of the house on the plan 3 and one's in the center. And we did that purposely. In fact, that was at the behest of, I don't remember if it was architectural committee or planning commission, to add a different front look to the single story house with the pool in the rear, because all we had was the rear pools was the 2-story house in a plan 3. And just without rambling on too long, the plan 1 and 2 are on the east side. They have pools in the front yard, so it's a whole different house. So we added to plan 5 by putting the entry in the center instead of going around the side of the house to vary the street scene. That's why it's the plan 5. We had 4 plans and we added another plan specifically to vary the street scene with having the entry in the front, in the center of the house on the front. And in the meantime, we've sold them all and continue to sell them. We are virtually sold out. We have 1 house left out of the first. Well, we have 44 lots, but 3 models in a parking lot. So we have 40 homes that we've put up for sale, and we've sold 39, and we're getting ready to release more houses over on these additional lots. As far as the access to the exclusive use easement, each lot has a small pony wall, small wall that sits up maybe a foot above the soil that represents the rear property line of the lot. And these are all the lots that are face into the olive grove, only the lots that facing into the olive grove. And then a 20-foot use easement beyond that. That easement is fenced in for the benefit of each lot. Each lot has their exclusive use easement fenced in with tubular steel fences going down to the rear of the use easement, and then tubular fence across the back. And then there's a gate. Each home has a gate to go from the exclusive use easement out onto the groves and pick up the trails. We don't have any problem with access. The pool sits in the backyard, either a little bit on one side or the other, but there's clear access for a homeowner to come out and walk around the left or right side of their pool down onto the exclusive use easement and out through the back gate. Now, there's nothing that the homeowner can put in that exclusive use easement. You can't improve it. You can't put a horseshoe pit back there. You can't put a fire pit. You can't do anything to it physically. They're restricted from doing anything there. So it's just the natural landscaping, and it's a buffer that works to buffer the homeowner of his rear yard and exclusive use easement from the trails. So people walking along the trails and whatnot, there's a buffer so that the trail is away from the homes and down the slope a little bit and down out of the way. So I don't know of any access issues we have. In fact, we don't have any access issues. Every homeowner can walk out the back of their home, go around the pool and into the exclusive use easement and out the back gate at the back of the easement. As far as the windows go, I don't know of any problems with windows out there on that project. It's windows we've been using in many projects, and so
I got a complaint from somebody at a different project about the same windows.
Yeah, so we have a project, the Vibe project. We built Q at the Vibe on Pacos Canyon, and we had some very high windows where the windows are stacked 3 high. And if the house is oriented a certain way and gets hot afternoon sun, we've had some problems with those windows. And we've been in a long process of replacing them all and going back through and making it all right. So we're doing what we need to do to fix everything. But we don't have any of those type of windows at Flare, the big high stack windows.
Thank you. I just want to respond back to that. It was really hard to open the windows, the sliders. They appear warped on the models. But the access issue through the exclusive use common area, there were places where the access is always, looks like the gates are always on the left side, but the access that the homeowner would have because of the pool placement is on the right side, and you have to walk across to get down, and in some instances it can be steep. I think that could be something we could look at your lots, make sure that the access and the pool placements don't conflict, so that it's an easy walk down to the trails, because the trails are, from our point of view, or at least they were from our point of view, one of the most exciting things about the Mural project. So I'm going to hold on to my point of view about that. Thank you very much for yours.
Well, I agree with you on the positive part of that, those access use easements. And what we can do, what I will do, is before we locate the gates or install the tubular steel fencing around the rear of the property, that we locate the gates in an area where there's more direct access. That's something we can do.
Thank you. Commissioner Hirschbein, you had a question.
Actually, I didn't have a question. I had a comment. I had the opportunity to see the project today, actually, and I hadn't seen it in quite a while. And the infrastructure is really beautiful. The amount of landscaping and the scale of the landscaping and the plant selection, it's really fantastic. The clubhouse is beautiful. Of course, I didn't get into it. It's roped off, but the infrastructure looks common area infrastructure looks just really beautiful. And I don't know if the master developer's on the call here now, but I just want to give him the credit that I think he deserves. When we approve these things, it's rather abstract. We're looking at a few sheets of paper, but to see the infrastructure, the quality that's there, it's really heartening to see a master developer come up with that level of quality and commitment to deliver something of superior design and quality. So I want to thank him for that.
Are there other comments? Other questions? Commissioner Song.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with the comments that have been said. And I also want to support Chairwoman on her comment about the windows. As impressed as I was with the project, it was very difficult for me to slide the doors open. And the layout to the pool and the backyard are just really nicely done. And then when you're about to open it, when you can only open a foot of it, it's discouraging. Thank you.
Can I say something?
This is
fine.
Sure, but hopefully it's responsive to Commissioner Song.
Well, as to the sliding glass doors, we've had some very high winds out there, dust winds. I'm not sure when you were there. Those winds come from the west and hit the back of those model homes that are backing up to the open space. And you can get a lot of silt and sand and sand in those tracks. And it's a constant battle trying to keep those things clean. So that may be why those doors were sticking a little bit. Don't know.
I think they were a little warped too, so, which does happen when things are left out in the sun out here. But that was the most discouraging piece of the project. I wanted to speak a little bit to Model 5. I actually think the front entry created kind of a strange little hallway. It didn't work as well as the side entry project, and created a strange kitchen where, when I looked at it, the island, you could only sit 2 people at the island. Those are things I just wanted to raise to you. I don't know if anybody else has a concern about Model 5. It didn't work as well. I mean, I think if we pushed it, we were wrong when we pushed you to do an extra model in that instance. But I don't know if anybody else agrees with me on that. I do think that I really am concerned about the back gates as well, and appreciate your willingness to make sure that the gate is located in a way that you have the most direct access.
You do that.
Commissioner Marizzi.
When I visited yesterday, unfortunately, the model homes weren't open. I guess Monday and Tuesdays they're not open, but I did drive around and I got out and walked around, and I was extremely impressed, at least in particular by this amenities building. It's very spacious. I didn't see any reason why you couldn't walk through there. Maybe those ropes weren't there when I went by. So I looked at the whole thing. The pool obviously has to be finished before people can go in there, I would assume. But you know, I had never seen it before. This is the first time I've ever been inside Mural, and it is impressive. So that's my only comment.
The matter is before the commission. I would make a motion that we approve this with the condition that the gates to the exclusive use common areas are located on the most direct path to the gates, most open path in the back. If nobody else agrees with me on Model 5, I wanted to raise it to you. I just think you don't need that one, but that's me. I don't think it adds. But nobody else has an issue with it, so that's my motion. Hope you'll listen to us about the windows. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Matters before the commission. Can you call the roll, please?
Chair Womack,
Yes.
Commissioner Song,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Morosi.
Yes.
The matter passes. Staff has a question. You're muted. Flynn, can you read back our condition?
Yes, your condition is relative to the gates, to make sure that the gates to the exclusive use easement area are located on the most direct path from the entrance.
Thank you. Edward, did you have anything?
Yeah, my question was, you mentioned earlier about the subcommittee looking at the location of the placement of those gates in planning area 5. So that was not part of the motion. So
It was not part of the motion. The applicant agreed to do that, and hopefully staff in their checks will make sure it's done.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we are going to Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Marizzi.
Hi there. I don't know if you all saw this over the weekend, this article in the Desert Sun that says Palm Springs taking legal action versus 4 stalled hotels. And it's an interesting article. Clearly the issues that I've been raising for a while, one of which is TOBA in there. But I had a question for our attorney, Mr. Priest. It says the city attorney's office is seeking a court-ordered receiver for the properties who would then be charged in court to complete the hotels or demolish them. What is a court-ordered receiver, and would it be one receiver for all 4?
Yes, Mr. Marucci, members of the commission. A court-ordered receiver is a code enforcement tool that is used for usually larger properties that require extensive work, rework in order to address their code violations. A receiver is an individual who's appointed by the judge. This is not an attorney. This is an actual third party who is empowered by the judge to basically deal with the property and address the code violations. We more often see this in the case of like a building that's run down and requires maintenance. The receiver would be appointed to go take over the building, fix the problems, and get the building back up to code. In this case, it's a little different because it would be either build the project or demolish what's there. Once the receiver finishes his or her work, they tender those costs to the court, and the costs can come out of the equity in the property. And that's a court-ordered lien for the cost of remedying the code violations. So that's the general thumbnail sketch of how a court-ordered receivership works. But yeah, it's a third party who's appointed by the court to deal in the property and address the issues. It could be, it's entirely up to the judge. It could be one receiver for all 4 properties. It could be 4 receivers, 1 for each property. That's going to really depend on the judge's call there.
Well, clearly it's not code violations. It's completion of the project or demolition in case of TOVA. What does this mean? It says the Desert Sun report was told by City Manager David Reddy that the legal action represents a parallel track in the city's strategy to get the hotels completed. Parallel track in a sense.
I can only assume, you'd have to ask Mr. Reddy specifically, but reading that quote, I assume as is typical with city code enforcement is it's sort of a, carrot and a stick approach. Continue to work with the owners to actually develop the hotel into an operating business that's a benefit to the community. Or there's the other approach, which is demolish what's there and bring it back to open ground that could be developed into something else later. So I believe that's what's meant by the parallel track, but ask Mr. Reddy specifically. I'm inferring further.
Okay, and then the last thing is it says, for example, a year from now, when we're down the road on both of these tracks, blah, 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 blah. A year from now, am I reading that right?
Well, you'd have to ask him what he means by that. Sometimes these cases take a while. It takes time to get the situation addressed, either demolition or construction. So I don't know if it would take a year, less, more. We would have to see. Each case you take on its facts.
How likely is a court to grant that?
Hard to say. I mean, again, each case is dependent upon its facts. I have some familiar with TOVA. The other hotels I have some general familiarity with, but I do not specifically deal in those court enforcement cases. I have attorneys in my firm that are dealing with that. And again, at the end of the day, it's the judge's call whether to appoint the receiver or not.
I have a question. So let's assume he appoints a receiver and the receiver proceeds to decides he either needs to demo it or construct it. Where does the money come from? I mean, it's okay to put a lien against the property, but how do you get a contractor paid in the meantime?
There are various ways of financing this. Receivers can go and secure financing based on the equity of the property in order to address violations. So there are financing mechanisms by which they can borrow against the property and do that.
That's assuming there's equity in the property.
Well, that's the big question mark. And as I said, you take every case on its facts.
Right. Okay, thanks.
One question is, are we to assume that there are code violations with unfinished properties? I mean, does the city have to prove that?
Well, that's my understanding of the city's position here is that failure to either bring the project to completion or to eliminate what's there is violating the code, and that is the violation that needs to be addressed, either by completing the project or bring it back to surface land.
And Flynn, could they go ahead and complete these projects now that so much time has run on them? Do they even have working drawings?
Generally, yes. And again, it depends on the project. For example, the Dream Hotel has, building permit that's been approved and drawings have been done. Ondas, same thing. Orchid Tree, we haven't seen their building permit yet. So no, in that case, we couldn't or wouldn't.
Okay. Interesting. The saga continues. Any other reports, requests, or comments? Perhaps we can mention the changes in the commission that are about to occur and have that part of the planning director's report.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. We would like to announce that on Monday night, the City Council made appointments to the Planning Commission. As you're aware, we have one vacant seat, and then we have two members who are up for reappointment. In the City Council action, they reappointed Vice Chair Maruzzi and Commissioner Hirschbein for an additional 3-year term. And they appointed J.R. Roberts to fill the vacant seat for a 3-year term. And so those were the appointments that were made on Monday night by the City Council. We expect that Mr. Roberts will be at the April 14th meeting of the Planning Commission and will be sworn in and ready to go. So congratulations to our reappointed members, and we welcome Mr. Roberts back to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Do you have an additional report or?
Yes, I just have one additional item to mention to the Planning Commission. As you're aware, we're in the process of implementing a new electronic plan submittal and software system for zoning applications and entitlements. With that, there will be some changes to our process, and most importantly, that will mean that we will no longer be dealing in paper applications or paper plans, that the process will be entirely electronic. So from submittal of the application to review of the application by staff, we're not going to be shuffling papers around any longer. What that also means, and here is something that might be a bit challenging for our board and commission members, is that we will no longer have paper agenda packets and backup materials, that all of the materials will be electronic. That might be a little bit difficult for some of you to go from being able to review paper plans and so forth to doing that electronically. But I just wanted to put that out there so that you're aware that there will be a change coming down the road once we begin to implement that system. So again, just a heads up on changes in terms of the implementation of the software.
Will the City Council also have to review everything electronically as relates to the projects come through the Planning Commission?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be tough, I know.
The electronic staff reports, easy to print them out. I like writing on mine and underlining and forming thoughts, but plans is a much bigger issue. Planning Commission has raised to you in the past that even the smaller plans we have are sometimes not sufficient for reading, and I don't know that that system is going to work for reading plans.
If I can respond.
Are you going to provide us with equipment to print larger versions?
I don't think that we'll provide you with individual printers. That would be too costly. In terms of the plans and the quality of electronic plans, keep in mind that to date, we don't have an electronic system in order to do that. That the plans that you've received so far have typically been scanned documents, which do lose resolution as you try and blow them up. Starting with the new system, you will have plans that are submitted that are intended to be read electronically. And then again, keep in mind that staff is going to be doing reviews electronically as well. We're not working off paper copies here either. And so the quality of the electronic submittal will be better than what you've had in the past.
Are you buying larger screens for your staff?
We are.
I think we may be involved in
Where do we sign up for those?
What?
Where do we sign up for those?
Yes.
Seriously, I have an iPad.
Me too.
Yeah. Certainly, that's something that we can look at in terms of materials for boards and commission members. That with the change in application packages, it might mean a change in technology for board and commission members. So let me have that discussion with our IT director. And Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Does anybody else have anything? With that, we are adjourned until Wednesday, April 14th at 5:30 p.m. Thank you all very much. Have a good 2 weeks.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.